Welcome back to the exam preparation video series for AI-102, Designing and Implementing an Azure AI Solution. I'm Bobbie Russell, a Microsoft Technical Trainer. This is the second episode out of a total of 6 episodes in this series. In this episode, we'll focus on implementing generative AI solutions. Here's a list of all the different skills you may be tested on. These are sometimes referred to as may included, meaning you may or may not see these on the exam. This list isn't exhaustive, and while we won't be covering every skill in the video, be sure you're able to perform these skills before you take your exam. Know that Azure AI Foundry provides a unified experience for AI developers and data scientists to build, evaluate, and deploy AI models through a web portal, SDK, or CLI. Azure AI Foundry is built on capabilities and services provided by other Azure services. This diagram that you see outlines the components and connections involved in setting up an AI solution using Azure services. It starts with the Azure OpenAI resource, which provides access to the latest OpenAI models. Next, it highlights the Azure AI Foundry. Under this, the project section offers access to a model catalog with projects from companies. And then we have our management section, which provides access to configuration and management of all the resources that we have. This diagram also shows connections between your AI Foundry project resource and your Foundry Hub. So make sure you understand this workflow as part of your exam preparation. This image walks you through the process of deploying a hub and project in Azure AI Foundry. At a minimum, you should be able to identify the steps in preparation for your exam. It's highly recommended, as stated before, to practice this in your personal lab environments to get further understanding of how this process works. Here's another image which walks you through the process of deploying generative AI model. At a minimum, as before, you should be able to understand how to identify the steps in preparing to deploy this as part of your exam. Again, we highly recommend that you work and do this in your lab environments to get that knowledge that you need. What is RAG? It's something you should know. It stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. Know what the purpose and use cases are of RAG. Know the phases of RAG solution development, breaking down the key tasks in each stage. Be able to recall the steps to implement a RAG by grounding a model in your own data. Documents are either pushed or pulled into the data pipeline, and the data pipeline processes each document individually by completing the steps that you see here. We've got chunk data, enriched chunks, embedded chunks, and persist. So understand those processes. It's important to understand that to run an evaluation, you'll need a test data set in either CSV or JSON-L format and an Azure OpenAI connection. This is the foundation for any evaluation process you're conducting. Additionally, you should be familiar with the different types of evaluation targets: model and prompt, data set, and prompt flow. You can use built-in evaluation metrics, or you can set up custom evaluation flows. So remember those things, and if you don't, definitely study those. When preparing for your exam, it's important to understand how to integrate your project into an application using the Azure AI Foundry SDK. This involves leveraging the SDK to connect your application with Azure's AI services, and this ensures seamless communication and functionality. Make sure you're familiar with inserting the necessary connection strings, and keep in mind this integration is crucial for building robust AI-powered applications that can effectively be utilized and utilize your Azure capabilities. When preparing for your exam, it's important to recall the ways to integrate your project into an application using the Azure AI Foundry SDK. Focus on how you can leverage prompt templates to manage and generate system messages effectively, ensuring that your AI can handle various inputs and context seamlessly. Additionally, consider how integrating these templates can simulate real-world interactions, enhancing the overall performance of your application. This knowledge will be critical in developing a robust and responsive AI solution. Know how to deploy an instance of the Azure OpenAI Service resource. Understand what happens in each of the steps shown in the slide here. As we stated before, the best way to understand this is to practice in your own labs to fully grasp the process. Understand the steps that are required to create this, And again, practice in your lab. And one important thing, personal emails of Outlook or Gmail type are not accepted for now, only corporate ones. Be able to summarize the different types of AI models, GPT-3, 5, GPT-4, embeddings, DALL-E, and so forth. Keep in mind that the newer GPT models are generally the best choice for all language and code generation tasks. As shown here, be able to select, deploy, and understand the steps when deploying an Azure OpenAI model. The code generation capabilities will be something you'll want to make sure you have a good understanding of for the exam. Understanding how you can use prompt engineering techniques to generate clear, concise code is important. Make sure you are comfortable with using prompts to break down code into smaller pieces to better understand what that code is doing. Here is a great way to generate code using natural language. One of the key aspects is to properly generate prompts that will effectively generate or analyze code. As you can see here, make sure you have a thorough understanding of the structure of the prompt as outlined in the image here. The task, prompt, and completion elements are critical, so make sure you review those. So what is DALL-E and its features? These are great questions that you'll need to know the answer to. It's not a search system for finding appropriate images. It's an AI model that generates new images based on data on which it's trained. So practice and understand how to use DALL-E. To try out DALL-E, you can set up an Azure OpenAI Service resource in an approved Azure subscription, and then practice generating images using DALL-E and prompts. If you've got a thorough understanding on how to deploy an Azure OpenAI service, next you'll need to know how to integrate that instance into your application. As mentioned before, understanding the SDKs is available is going to be important and critical for your overall request. Know that you can start exploring Azure OpenAI capabilities with a no-code approach through the chat playground. It's a simple text box where you can submit a prompt to generate a completion. Be able to summarize the parameters to control generative behavior. When using the chat playground, you can customize the setup description to set the context for the chat session and to set the following parameters, things like max response, top P, and past message history. So what are those? This is something that you'll definitely need to understand for your exam. Remember the ways to configure model monitoring and diagnostic settings. Know the features of model monitoring. Know that if you already set up tracing in Azure AI Foundry portal, all you need to do is select the link to check out your insights for generative AI application dashboard. Know that you need to go to your resources page in the Azure portal and select the overview tab on the left pane. Under the Essential section, you'll find the autoscale line, and from there you can select the link to view the autoscale settings. To study for topics related to model deployment and update policies, focus on understanding the difference between the update options that are available. Learn about manual upgrades for deploying with a specific version and automatic updates to the default versions as needed. Also, understand what update policies mean. To excel in the exam, it's important to understand the process of enabling tracing and collecting feedback as shown in the image here. The image outlines steps for enabling tracing using the Azure AI Foundry portal and provides details on how to collect feedback and send it to your application insights. Be prepared for questions related to this topic on your exam. When studying prompt engineering, remember the following. 1. Provide clear instructions. 2. Primary, supporting, and grounding content. 3. Providing cues. 4. Requesting output composition. 5. Using a system message. 6. Conversation history and few-shot learning. And finally, chain of thought. Make sure you understand each of those concepts in preparation for your exam. To thoroughly prepare, you'll need to understand the concept of fine-tuning models, such as GPT 3.5 Turbo, by training them with additional data. You should also grasp how fine-tuning can improve request quality and adapt models for larger examples in semantic models. while recognizing that it's an expensive and time-consuming process that should be reserved for your most essential cases. Implement a prompt flow solution. Know that prompt flow is a development tool designed to streamline the entire development lifecycle of AI applications powered by your LLMs. Recall the steps to implement a prompt flow solution. Use large language multimodal models in Azure OpenAI. Recall how to set up a multimodal or multi-agent system in Azure OpenAI. To do that, you set up your local development environment, and then you follow the steps for cloning a repository to run your application. You can find the project connection string inside your project, and then in the overview section is where you get that string. While you're still in the Foundry portal, go to ID Agent, and this can be found in the Agent section. Azure OpenAI credentials can be found under Models and Endpoints. Other things, implementing an Azure OpenAI Assistant. Know the steps for configuring the project to use Azure OpenAI model inference capabilities in Azure AI Services. And to do that, understand the steps for doing that. Other things, implementing model reflection. You'll need to understand, what is model reflection? Base model selection, pre-production evaluation, and post-production monitoring. Deploy containers for use on local and edge devices. So keep that in mind also, as well as some of the prerequisites that are required for that. And finally, implementing orchestration of multi-generative AI models. Understand why do agents matter in the context of generative AI. To recap this episode, we discussed how to build generative AI solutions in Azure AI Foundry. We looked at the Azure OpenAI Service to generate content, and we looked at optimizing and operationalizing a generative AI solution. Remember, this is your largest group with 25 to 30% of your exam content coming from it. So thank you for watching episode 2 on implementing generative AI solutions. Be sure to join us for episode 3, where we cover implementing an agentic solution.